It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another Real Estate Breakfast across our weekend as we navigate together through our 2025 year. And a Sunday morning has arrived, March the 2nd, and boy, oh boy, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, what was that out of the White House yesterday? Did you feel for Zelensky? Of course you did. How could you not when you've got the big bully, two of them ganging up on him? And where does this lead is anybody's guess. I said it before, didn't I? It's going to be a very, very long 4 years of this administration. And Trump was talking about World War III. Let's just hope we don't go there. Well, another busy week. Lots to talk about. Coming up on Monday, of course, we spoke to Annette Crone, and she was talking about the proactive planning required for buybacks, particularly around flooding. Nicola Powell was here from Domain, talking about Domain's latest first home buyer report. Boy, there was quite a bit to that report. Claire Tacon from the Consumer Action Law Centre's financial counselling practice, she was talking about the fact that over the last year, 1 in 4 calls that they receive on their helpline has been about mortgage arrears. And also we rounded off the week talking to Matthew Hughes all about Perth's property market. So that is all coming up next.
Grab your weekly dose of inspiration to help build a real estate portfolio. We talk to the best in the business every day. Learn from the professionals and know your property with us.
Long-term residents often underestimate future risks based on past experience. You know, the whole raising awareness, improving access to risk data and a whole lot of other things is going to, I guess, help people just to understand that this is not something that is retreating at the moment. You know, underestimating these disasters is a really bad starting point.
Yeah, again, so in our research, we talked to stakeholders working in this area, and a lot of them said that this is really an issue. I mean, obviously, local knowledge is also important because people understand, if we are talking about flooding, they understand the river. But because of climate change, actually, a lot of the natural hazards or the events become more impactful, and that's where sometimes past experience doesn't help. I mean, again, we have seen that in the Lismore floods. I actually was there at that point in time, and we stayed in Ballina, and people told me, oh, we get never flooded. It's usually Lismore. And then the next day there was flooding. So this really shows where we have this experience, but it doesn't count anymore. And that's why we need good data, updated data assumptions, and also the same assumptions. So that's sometimes the issue with flooding studies, that different assumptions, for example, in relation to warming or something, are taken, and then that obviously gives different results. So for one thing, we need good data, the same assumptions, and then really this making them public so that people can actually have a look and understand what their risk is and then prepare for it or decide if they still want to live there.
I just want to come back, Annette, to these words, which I think are very frustrating for people when they hear it, and that is a 1 in 100 year flood event. We've talked about that on the podcast before. I wish people would actually stop saying this now because, you know, you can have 2 events or even 3 events within the time frame of 2 years, and that should be 300 years, not 1 in 100.
You're exactly right. And I remember there was this great heading, what is a 100-year flood event and why does it happen so often? Yeah, we need to change the language here. And again, I think in this sector, there's awareness of that we need to change the language. It's probably just a bit slow. And probably the reason why we're still using that is that it's kind of easier to understand than a lot of the other technical terms. It's just that for some of those floods, we don't know anymore if it's a 100-year event. It's probably more likely to be every 50 years, or as you say, even every second year now. So yes, we definitely need to change the language around that.
You've decided to hold off until the end of the year. You say that by that time, the interest rate would have taken effect, 2 or 3 or 4, with a bit of luck, and your job market space might have improved. And you say that you're going to keep listening in the meantime, and thank you for those kind words as well in your email. That is great that you could share your property journey with us. I've got to say, there is a lot to unpack there. You would have heard me advocating time and time again only to buy when you are ready. Yes, real estate agents will always say the best time to buy is now. However, we're not a real estate company and therefore not in the game of selling properties. So, Jacko, I think you've done the right thing there. Job security in many industries isn't a guarantee. Well, let's face it, in what job do you get these days where you can say, I've got a guaranteed job for the next 2, 3, 4 years? So if it is a little bit shaky, waiting out rather than buying and then potentially losing your job after you've done that and then maybe forced into a sale, that would be a bad result all round. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Right now, let's welcome in to the Real Estate Breakfast Nicola Powell from Domain, who has been patiently listening to Jacko's dilemma. And what about that, Nicola, from Jacko? He won't be alone, of course. It highlights the cost of living linked with job security playing major factors for not only Jacko, but a lot of first home buyers.
It is definitely a financial challenging time, I think, for anybody looking to get into the property market. And, first of all, congratulations to Jacko that he was, is at that point where he is really planning to make that move. And we know it's such a financial hurdle, and to get to that point of looking for a home and buying and potentially buying it is such a great milestone, I think. And I agree that I do think that it's about timing the purchase when it's right for your own personal circumstances. I think the worst scenario that you could potentially be in is losing your job and then defaulting on those mortgage repayments. And, there's 2 ways to look at affordability. It's not only saving a deposit, but it's also the ongoing repayments that you need to be able to make. And look, we are expecting rate cuts and more rate cuts this year. But overall, he said he was purchasing in Canberra. Canberra is a buyer's market at the moment, and there is lots of supply. Overall choice is 55% higher than the 5-year average in the ACT. So choice is there. And those conditions are probably going to be largely stagnant. We're not expecting prices to rise significantly in Canberra. So I would always lay out every decision needs to be the primary guidance is what is right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of nicely segues us into Domain's latest first home buyer report. Now, that has been released this morning, and it reveals that purchasing a unit can shave nearly 2 years off the time needed to buy a home compared to a house. So maybe just sort of set that up a little bit for us this morning, Nicola.
So units do offer a quicker pathway to being able to save that lump sum deposit. And that is of course, because prices are much lower in the unit sector compared to houses. And with this first home buyer report, we actually focused in on the entry price point. So that's what's called the 25th percentile, which is much more in line with what a first home buyer is really going to be aiming for financially. And look, across all of our capital cities, and the gaps are slightly different. Purchasing units does supercharge your time to market. Saving that lump sum deposit is the first financial hurdle that a first home buyer needs to get to. And we base this on 20% deposit. You can go lower than that. Then you need to pay things like lender's mortgage insurance. But, as you said, it's almost 2 years shaved off the time it takes to save when you opt for a unit. And in Sydney, it's almost 2.5 years. In some of our other capitals, in Melbourne, 1 year, 8 months, Brisbane, 1 year, 4 months. So it really is supercharging your speed to market. And I think for many, particularly with the tight rental markets that are still in many parts of Australia, first home buyers are really trying to supercharge access to the market.
the top reason that people are calling us now, the most common conversation that we're having with clients is about mortgage arrears. And in the 10 years that I've been in the financial counselling sector, that's never been the case before. It used to be an unusual conversation, or it definitely wasn't the conversation that we were having every day with people. And, they were always the hardest conversations because, you're talking about someone's home. Yeah, so it's been a big shift really in the work that we do on the National Debt Helpline.
Yeah, I think that you guys mentioned that before 2022, the top reason for the calls were credit card debt and energy bills. So that kind of signals exactly how much of a change there's been. And with this PropTrack piece, new analysis of over 52,000 Australian households, they are facing severe financial strain. Households spending more than they earn. They are cutting back on these essentials. They're dipping into their savings or taking on more debt to service it. I just wonder how much of a health risk we're actually sort of talking about here with the people that you're talking to, because it's got that flow-on effect. How can it not?
No, as you say, how can it not? I mean, that's very common with the people that we speak to, that, they talk to us about how their doctor has told them they need a certain medicine or procedures done, but they're putting it off because they just can't afford it. Not being able to afford dental care is really, really common. It's also the case that we know that if you're in financial stress, that affects everything in your life, including your mental and physical health and your relationship. So it's not just, I can't afford to pay the bills. It's just, that's deeply stressful and harmful to an individual, that kind of financial stress.
Make sure that you're talking to your lender. Your lender does not want to see you go into a mortgage sale. That is the last thing that your bank wants to do. But some people, Claire, are actually very nervous, aren't they, about talking to their bank? So they kind of just leave it when they should be talking to them.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. And we see that a lot. I think, people that we speak to are often, they may have spoken to their bank and they're really grateful that the bank has given them, say 3-month reprieve on paying or reduced their payments for 3 months. But people don't realise that the credit legislation that we have in Australia gives people the right to ask for their contract to be varied if their circumstances have changed. And it's worded so that the customer can ask their lender for whatever variation they need on their contract so that they can meet their obligations. And the lender has to consider that request. If they don't agree with it, they have to say why. Because this is a right that people have. If they can't reach agreement with their lender, they can make a complaint with the Australian Financial Complaints Authority. So people have more rights and more options than they often know about when they call us.
Don't navigate the real estate market alone. Let us help guide you in the world of real estate every day. Make better informed decisions with the latest news and insights.
Domain reported that in the December quarter, the median dwelling values across capital cities have actually hit 1.01 million, more than doubling. Yes, doubling since 2012. Well, right now, let's go to Perth and catch up with Matthew Hughes, the Managing Director from Capital Property Advisory. Good morning to you, Matthew. A little bit of good news in your corner. You were voted on to PIPA, so congratulations. Well done.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, it's a very exciting opportunity for me to join the board of PIPA, which is the Property Investment Professionals of Australia, for anyone who's unaware of them, and join some of the top practitioners in the industry and help them advocate for higher standards in the industry, support investor education, and get people access to qualified independent advice. So I'm actually in Brisbane right now, having just completed my first board meeting yesterday, and it was a very productive day, and I'm looking forward to what we can achieve this year together.
How big is the organisation, just for those listening this morning?
There's hundreds of members across the country, and it's one of the longest standing organisations in the country as well. And all the members adhere to a strict code of conduct. And it's not, I'm also a member of REBA, which is the Real Estate Buyers Agency Association of Australia. That's specifically for buyers agents, whereas PIPA extends to other advisors, finance and mortgage brokers, accountants, anyone in that space.
You're always getting busier and busier, spreading yourself all over the place. Right, let's get into talking about Perth, because in a recent article it was suggested that Perth is heading towards a housing oversupply, but I think you're sort of challenging that viewpoint a little bit.
The article was by Michael Matusik, who's a respected journalist and data analyst. Certainly not trying to pick holes in Michael's work, but just on this particular one, his claim that Perth is moving towards oversupply probably doesn't align with what what's actually happening on the ground here. So while there may be more dwelling approvals in the pipeline, the real issue, as we've discussed previously, is the time it takes to deliver those and where the supply is being delivered. And the reality is that in areas with good transport links, employment hubs and essential amenities, land supply is still critically low in Perth. The available land that we see tends to be out on the far urban fringe, so you see the city further sprawling out, which is not what we want. And out there, the demand tends to be weaker and infrastructure is still catching up. And then on top of that, again, as we've discussed previously, many builders are struggling with labour shortages and material costs, meaning that even approved homes are going to be taking a lot longer to build. And the idea that Perth is on the verge of oversupply completely ignores those factors. So if anything, I think we're still facing a shortfall of well-located housing, and I think the market remains under significant pressure and will do so for some time.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.